Theology Friday. I am Aaron Tomlinson, and he is
I am Derrick Day, and I'm glad to be here, Aaron.
good to see you. It's
Good to see you too, man.
we both jumped on and looked at each other and said, "Well, it's Hat Day." We both said it.
Yeah, man. Without even sharing the memo, how
I know.
serendipitous is that?
Yeah. So, what you got in the glass tonight?
Well, I decided to go a little ghetto, a little hood, and I've got some Riuniti Lambrusco.
You went, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Julie really likes that. She really likes that stuff. I can't. It makes me want to throw up. I'll be honest with you.
well, you know what? It's not bad as far as cheap wine. Like, let me put it this way: it's not Boone's Farm or Mad Dog or anything like that. You know, it's a cut above that.
Of
But
course,
you know, like
I just cost us a Reunity sponsorship.
you know, Reuniti when you want to get fucked up real cheap.
There you go. So I have a mixed drink tonight.
Oh, nice.
I have spiced cranberry Sprite.
Okay.
So I don't know. It's a holiday drink. Pretty good. My kids rave about it. But
Okay.
I go back to the doctor November 7th. So we'll see what they
Okay.
say.
Cool.
We'll see what they say. But I'm still being good. Following doctor's orders.
Good for you, man. I hope that you can be like Timothy and have a little wine for your stomach's sake.
Man,
You know.
I'm telling you, I can't wait to get back to normal. But anyway, we're here right now. It's been good though. I went back to the gym today. I got to tell you, or not today, this week. Boy, I tell you, that's a good thing I'm an older guy. I can focus on form and nobody's worried about how much weight I'm putting up there.
Yeah.
It was pretty pathetic, man. I haven't actually been in a gym. I've done, home exercises and stuff, but I joined Planet Fitness and I haven't been in a gym for like 7 years probably.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it was, yeah. So I felt good though, man. I felt really good. So
Well, like this week since I've been back in Tulsa, I haven't really worked out, but I've been doing a lot of shit around the house. So,
yeah,
it kind of counts for the same minutes as far as Fitbit is concerned.
yeah.
But I was doing like 30 minutes of a mix of cardio and strength training, and then I run a mile, right?
Yeah,
And so I got to the point where the last mile that I ran, it was like 12 minutes even.
that's not bad.
No, I mean for 62 years old, man, that's not too shabby at all.
Great. That is great.
So,
Yeah, I think I'd be back in the ER if I tried to run a mile right now. But they were impressed I was getting last time I was at the doctor, they were impressed I was getting 15,000 steps a day. So
oh wow, that's impressive.
yeah. Yeah, I was making sure I was doing plenty of walking, not all at one time, but just making sure I park as far from the door as possible and just try to get those extra steps in.
Yep.
So I'm praying, everybody's praying for that close parking spot. I'm like, 2 parking lots away. Okay, I'll get my extra
Yeah.
steps in this way.
Well, like for my credit, my buddy Charlie Red stopped by last night. It was good to see him, and
Mhm.
first thing Charlie said, he said, "Man," he said, "you look good. Lost weight. You're trimming up." And I was like, "Great," because Charlie's big on exercise. So for him to call that out was a really cool thing. So
Yeah, I keep waiting for somebody to say that to me, but I was complaining this week. I'm like, doing all this stuff, I'm feeling better. Nobody's commented that I look better.
well, like when you after you got out of the hospital, I said you look great. It was there was a noticeable difference in at least in your weight. So
Yeah,
and
I was in bad shape for a while. Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to make this about my health. So we're talking about atheism tonight.
yay!
So Derrick, you have a new book that's coming out. I understand, maybe 2 new books coming out, but
Actually, 3.
3 new books coming out. So
Yeah.
why don't you, before we jump into the topic, why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Okay, so um, I had gone to the hospital for a couple of days, and then when I got out, I said I'm changing my exercise habits, changing my eating habits, And I said, let me get busy on these books. So they were in, different stages of completion.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally just said, okay, let me finish these things out. So the first book is the sequel to Deconstructing Religion, is Deconstructing Religion Part 2. And originally, when I was doing the Heretic Happy Hour podcast, I said I wanted the subtitle for that book to be "Burn All That Shit to the Ground." That was literally what I wanted the subtitle to be. But then I said, nah, I'm not going to do that, because in this particular iteration, this book, I will say in all candor that if you're deconstructing, this is the last book on deconstruction you'll ever need. This is it. This will get you down to the root cause of things, and you will be at the proverbial fork in the road, where you will either say, I'm strengthening my faith, whatever that is, whether you be Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever, or I'm going to shit can the whole thing and start all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And in either case, it's fine. And watch this, because I actually went through atheism, and I went through it. I didn't park there. I didn't land there, but I was there. I was there for 3 years. And now I realize that if you don't really flirt with atheism at some point, you really haven't deconstructed. If that hasn't crossed your mind, you really haven't deconstructed. So that's the first book. Then the second book is a book on putting together a good speech, being a good professional speaker, and I call it meta speech. And it's kind of like metadata. Metadata is like essentially data about data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so meta speech is the data or the DNA of a speech. How do you basically determine what your own speech DNA is, and how to embrace that, and how to unpack it, and expand it to make you a more effective speaker. And the third book is a book on leadership, and it's leadership through the lens of a martial artist. And because my two primary martial arts foundations are Wing Chun Kung Fu and Jeet Kune Do through the Warrior's Way system. So it's a book on leadership through the lens of Wing Chun Kung Fu and Jeet Kune Do. And the compare and contrast is this. I'm going to say this and I'll shut up and we can move on to the topic at hand. But basically, Wing Chun is like a form-based martial art. So like you have basically four forms, which is the Sil Lim Dao, which is the basic form, Chum Kill, which is the next more advanced form, and then you have Bill G, which is the aggressive or protagonist form, and then you have what they call the Mook Jong, which is working out on the wooden dummy, right? And so all of these are the four forms of Wing Chun. But what happened was that the story goes that Bruce Lee got in trouble for teaching Westerners Kung Fu. And the Chinese elders said, okay, you need to stop. And so Bruce Lee said, listen, if I can beat your best fighter, you let me teach. If I lose, then I stop teaching. Well, the story goes is that that Bruce Lee won the fight, but he was severely injured, and he suffered a near crippling back injury in the fight. And so it was during that time that he wrote the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and basically established a new martial art form without form, without structure, right? So it basically it talks about management from both a structured and an unstructured standpoint, and how you can merge the two to be a more balanced leader.
Sounds amazing.
Those are the three books that I'm working on, and I'm thinking that third one, that's going to be a bestseller. Stay tuned.
Yeah, it's a unique perspective on leadership for sure. Love it. People are into martial arts, and they'll love it too, I'm sure. So.
Yep.
Cool, man. Cool. So I talked Sunday in my Sunday morning live a little bit. I mentioned atheism in line with scientific materialism. Still beating the same dead horse, it feels like. Um, but so it's funny. I just had an astrology chart done, and I know there are people out there, especially the atheists, probably don't believe in astrology at all. But it was interesting in my 10th house, which your 10th house governs career, but also public perception. And I have a lot of Scorpio energy in that particular house. And so I realized sometimes when I'm speaking, I have my stinger out, even when it doesn't need to be.
But you're a Virgo by
my
birth,
my
right?
my my birth sign, yeah, my sun
Okay.
sign is Virgo. Um, but then you have houses. I mean, astrology is really complex, right? That's why I get frustrated with people that. Okay, so there's a proverb that says, "A fool answers a matter before he hears it." I
Yeah.
think that's good wisdom, regardless of where it comes from.
Yep.
Opinion on the Bible, whatever.
Agreed.
Uh, and there's so much more to astrology than just like your horoscope and your sun sign and all that stuff. And so most people that just discount it have never really given it a fair hearing, but that's not the topic for tonight. But I realized my stinger was out a little bit when I was talking about atheism. So that's how I'm setting it up. And it's a very nuanced conversation. And so I thought it'd be fun to bring you on and just have a conversation about atheism and about people who deconstruct.
Mhm.
So that's why your book, perfect segue. People who deconstruct. And I've said this from the beginning, even before I was flirting with atheism, or however you want to put it, taking it seriously as a proposition, which I certainly did that. And you helped me do that
Yep.
tremendously. And I'm glad I didn't get, my feathers ruffled. I'm glad I went through that process.
Yep.
But anyway, it's a very nuanced conversation. And so I thought it would be fun to talk about that, and maybe as a follow-up rather than me trying to, because you went further than I did for sure. It's sort of as a follow-up to nuance it. But I said from the beginning that it seems to me that people that deconstruct almost have a binary choice when it comes to belief in God. Either you believe in the God of the Bible as that God is represented in Western Christian theology, or the Abrahamic religions as they've become. So Yahweh, or, the God of the Bible, right?
Yep.
The way we understand it. You either believe in that or you don't believe in any God at all. And it became kind of a binary choice. That was my perception. That was my take on it from the beginning. And I have certainly observed that. What's interesting to me is that other cultures also have a faith in God, even to a certain degree, monotheism, that there is one God or one creator or one source, it's certainly a part of indigenous cultures, shamanic cultures, but even Hinduism. And Hinduism's we think Christianity is diverse and complex in terms of different beliefs, but Hinduism is off the chain when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I'm certainly not well versed enough in Hinduism to speak with much expertise about it. But my point is, there are lots of other human beings that have believed in a creator or a source or a God in some sense. And God's kind of a problematic word anyway. So I'll set it up this way. Like in the Hebrew Bible, when it starts out, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, the word is Elohim. And that's a plural. That's a plurality. Now, it is translated as gods in other places. So when it says, "You shall have no other gods before me," it's Elohim, right? And it's translated gods. So it'd be interesting, why didn't the English translators translate it, "In the beginning, the gods created the heavens and the earth"? Because that would seem to be more accurate with just a comparison. But yeah. My point is, there was a lot of different understandings about what God is or who God is. And the word God is problematic because in the English, it comes from the German word where we get good.
Right.
And so I don't know. It's just, it's an interesting thing. Elohim and God don't translate well, is what I'm trying to say. There's nothing in the word Elohim that would translate etymologically to the word God in English at all.
Right.
So that's how I'll set it up, Derrick.
So let me say this: I spent the day with my friend and brother Patrick Jubert, who you met at the wedding,
Yeah,
and
good guy.
Jube and I, let me just say this. First of all, I have a confession to make, right?
Mhm.
And that is, I still love the art of preaching as an oratory um,
Sure.
expression, right?
Mhm.
I love the cadence, the hoop, um, the allegory, illusion, all of those things. I love it, and when someone really preaches,
Mhm.
there's something. It's almost like listening to a really good song, right?
Mhm.
Because somebody is crafting a work of art. That's what I'll call it. So to those of you who are out there preaching, I salute you. But Patrick Jubert is a special character, and so to just I'm not going to unpack our entire conversation, at least not on the air. You
Mhm.
know, I
Of
mean,
course.
because you've met him, so you know him, and there are things that I can share with you privately. But I'll say this is that we were talking about Elohim, exactly the same thing that you were saying, and that's plural.
Mhm.
And when you look at the Bible as an overarching document comprising multiple books by multiple authors over multiple time frames to dealing with multiple cultures, that you can see that there's a lot borrowed from Kemetic, or Egyptian religion,
For
as
sure.
well as Babylonian in regards to the Epic of Gilgamesh and things like that, right? And then you'll also see some, what do you call it? I forget what Ahura Mazda, that whole belief system. So I say all this to say that first of all, when you look at the Bible was essentially a big dick contest book.
Mhm.
That my God is bigger and better than your God, kind of thing. In other words, the writers of the Old Testament, they were trying to give the Hebrew people some hope, you know, that they had a God that was superior to all other gods. And excuse me, if we just get on board with this God and follow his precepts and all of that, which were not his precepts, they were the precepts of the people who were writing it. But if you get on board with these precepts, everything will be okay. And when you don't get on board with these precepts, that's when everything goes sideways. Now, I say all this to say that that in the Bible, it talks about people who go after other gods,
Right.
but it never really speaks about people who go after no God.
It's true.
So, it's like, if does that mean that if you're an atheist, does that make you a better person in the sight of God? I mean, semantically, it would allude to that,
Sure.
right? So, I think about this, and when I think about atheists, man, I've met some atheists that were just, I mean, that are not just work, but are incredible people. It's like, our buddy Tommy or Jimmy,
Yep.
these guys, consider themselves to be atheists, and they are two of the most wonderful human beings walking the earth.
Yeah.
Now, when I went through my flirtation, and I won't even say it's a flirtation, I had an outright blatant affair with atheism. I mean, it's like, me and atheism were really knocking the boots for a minute.
Yeah.
And and the reason for this is that, like, I wasn't angry. People accuse me of being angry, and people accuse atheists. They say, "Oh, you're mad at God." I'm not mad with God. It's like I can't, produce any evidence of
Mhm.
God.
Mhm.
Now, here's where you helped me, because you said I helped you. So here's where I return the favor, Aaron, is that you had said to me on more than one occasion, because I'm going to tell you something, guys. If Aaron and I did a recording of everything that we talk about outside of this show, we could do a Patreon on this thing and just fucking clean up
Yeah.
because I think it's really, really interesting. But you had said that if all it is just a chemical or biological process, and that is random chance, then there is no hope, right?
Mhm.
And so where you hung your hat, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Sure.
is on the theme of consciousness.
Mhm. Correct.
That this universal, pervasive, persistent consciousness is what connects us all, right?
Mhm.
And because we frame our worlds with consciousness, who's to say that consciousness isn't framing something? And where I kind of got on board, well, not kind of, where I got on board with what you were saying is that I came to a conclusion that energy is sentient.
Mhm.
Energy is not created or destroyed, which means that all of the energy that's ever existed is all the energy that will ever exist. The energy was present in the eternal past, and it'll be present in the eternal future, right? And it'll never ever be destroyed. So with that being said, anything that persists over time has the ability, I think, to understand.
Mhm.
you know People, and I think that this is where, like in the Bible, where Jesus said that the rocks would cry out. How does a rock cry out? Well, if a rock is comprised of energy, and this energy is sentient, then that means that this energy could have, if it's if that energy is expecting some kind of response, and it doesn't perceive that response, that it will have a reaction, right? So anyway, I say all this to say that I wrote a whole chapter in my book, in Deconstructing Religion Too, and it's this, that basically, and this is a timely topic, because if you haven't at least flirted with atheism, if you haven't at least considered it, if you haven't at least passed through it, then you haven't really deconstructed. If you're deconstructing and just trying to um, unpack or nuance your spiritual perspective, you're not
Mhm.
really deconstructing. All you're doing is basically splitting hairs.
Mhm.
You've taken the hair and you try to see how fine you could split it. You're trying to find out how many angels can you make dance on the head of a pin, right? But if you just say, okay, I'm at this crossroads where I have to either look at either completely shit canning what I believe, that what I believe, I've rendered it to be absolute, total, complete bullshit, or or you come back to it and you say, okay, this has given me the ammunition to answer the critics, to be an effective apologist
Mhm.
for my faith, right?
Mhm.
And so this was something that when I was writing the book, I was thinking to myself, I said, how can I throw a bone to my Christian brothers and sisters, because all of humanity are brothers and sisters.
Right.
So let's get that out. But how can I say something to my Christian brothers and sisters? Because what I'm saying in this book is something it's very challenging. It's one of those things that it's going to it. Here's the thing, and that's the other thing too. If you look at your faith paradigm and you don't get pissed off at some point, you really haven't deconstructed. If you're going through this, tra la 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 la, happy go lucky, you're not really deconstructing. You're just kind of going through the motions, right?
Mhm.
So anyway, that is, you know, where I am on atheism. So I've said to you, and I've said to my wife, and to my mom and others, because and everybody's happy about this because I no longer consider myself an atheist. I don't
Yeah.
consider myself an atheist at all. I consider myself to be an agnostic anti-theist. I don't have anything good to say about theology or theism.
Yeah.
I'm done with that. But as far as like what is God, how is God manifest, how is God expressed, I don't know. But I know that there are things that I can't explain. There are things that that cannot be scientifically explained. And so those things I say, okay, I put them on the shelf and I leave them to people like Aaron Tomlinson to help us navigate them better.
Let
So,
me let me ask you this question. And you have to forgive me. You just identified yourself as what again?
all right, say it again.
You just identified your beliefs as what again?
Yeah,
What was the
yeah.
term you used?
I consider myself to be an agnostic anti-theist.
Agnostic anti-theist. So it's one of the when I was saying that the topic's very nuanced. Can you define for us what that category means? Some of us that aren't as fluent
Yeah.
in that, and maybe even expand on, compared to other identifications that people might
Sure.
have that identify as atheists.
So when I was an atheist, I believed in nothing. I didn't believe I didn't have a belief at all. What I
Mhm,
said, I had confidence in that which was tangible, measurable, and repeatable. I
mhm,
used to use those words very consistently during my time as an atheist. Now, as
right.
an agnostic, I, agnostic just simply says, I don't know.
Mhm,
I don't know because it's like ag is uncertainty and gnostic, is knowledge. So it's uncertain knowledge, right? And when I say I'm an anti-theist, well, I think that that theism and theology is essentially polishing the brass on the Titanic, right? It's a pointless exercise because it's funny that there's an entire scholastic intellectual discipline dedicated to theology and theism, right?
mhm,
Well, how
mhm,
can you have an intellectual, uh, meaningful discourse over
mhm,
something that you don't know concretely?
mhm,
And don't get me wrong, it's like you don't know everything in science, but like there are things like black holes. We've never actually observed a black hole. We've never actually observed a wormhole. We've never actually observed a whole lot of phenomenon, but we know mathematically because the math holds up, right?
mhm,
That if I put this into the model says, okay, that works, right? And
mhm,
and there is no model for theism. There is no model for theology. There is nothing that says empirically that a God exists.
mhm,
So as an anti-theist, that means I am opposed to anything theistic or any theology because I don't think that it merits any. I don't think that something that you cannot quantify merits study. and,
got
and so that's where I am. But what I do believe, what I do believe in, Aaron, because
it.
I actually do. I can say I believe in something, and you know what that something is? I believe in consciousness.
Mhm,
I could, even though science hasn't completely quantified consciousness, we understand it as a layer of the scientific spectrum.
mhm,
And we do see how energy in a sentient manner, it creates an area of observation. It creates or there's a creative aspect that's manifest from it because again we create our reality. We create our reality with our thoughts. We create our reality with our words. And there are some things that we don't have control over, a lot of things, but it's like those things that we have control over. we're able to, to deal with those. But those things that we have no control over, then we, we table that and keep it moving, right?
Yep. Yep.
So anyway, that's when I say I'm an agnostic anti-theist. I simply say I have no use for theism, theology, any God, any study of gods, any study of religion, of spirituality as expressed in any religion. But I'm not sure as to whether or not there is some higher power.
Mm-hmm.
I hold out the possibility that there is, and again, what helped me turn the corner, and that was getting reacquainted with Maya, and eventually building a relationship that culminated in marriage. So I can't just say, well, that's just it's just coincidence. I think it's more to it than that, but I don't chalk it up to any divine providence. So
Gotcha.
that's it.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it's interesting for me. So this is where I got hung up with atheism. This is where, and again, and I've said this from the very beginning on this program, in all our private conversations, there are just certain experiences that I've had that have been hallmarks throughout my life, that it's like, there is no tangible, measurable explanation for what I experienced in these moments. So where I get hung up is with the scientific materialism. So scientific materialism, again, I may be misrepresenting it. I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a scientist. But it's this idea that what is concrete, what is tangible, as you said, what's observable, especially what's measurable, scientific method with what's repeatable. This is the entire scope and nature of existence. So therefore, anything that does not fit into this category cannot exist. That's where I got hung up with it.
Yeah.
Because what if there is categories outside of that? What if there's categories of reality, things in existence that cannot fit into tangible, observable, measurable, all the principles of science? So the benefit of that is I don't have to throw out science. Let's be honest. A lot of religious people, in order to preserve their religious beliefs, have to throw out the scientific method. And we see that, I guess, in the most extreme cases being like the Scopes trials from the last century. I don't even remember when that was, what decades, but for the people that aren't familiar, it was kind of an American version of fundamentalism versus Darwinism.
Yep.
And a full-on rejection of natural science, just a full-on rejection of the natural sciences, in my opinion, because the evidence of natural sciences is contradicting our faith in a 7-day young earth creation, et cetera, and so on. Evolution, although I think it's falsely stated that we evolved from apes, I think that's way oversimplifying what people think.
Yep.
But this idea that we evolved from apes, that we're not created, therefore not created in the image of God. So by saying science is its own valid category and has tremendous benefit to mankind, 100% value it, but not everything can fit into that category. Not everything in existence. In other words, everything that exists cannot fit into that box. Right. And that's where I had difficulty. And what I ran into was the scientific arguments being the primary arguments for atheism or against theism. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I'm not going to share that. I always wonder, like, how much of my personal experiences I should share publicly and how much I shouldn't. I think I'll hold on to that one. But, definitely. So for me, consciousness is not something. Consciousness itself, in its essence, is not something that can fit into the scientific category. We can measure the effects scientifically. So, for example, and comes out of my background in psychology as a counselor, right? So, psychology kind of began. I mean, again, this is oversimplified, but let's say it began, to really take shape in the 20th century with people like Sigmund Freud and all of his followers, right?
Yep.
And initially, it was the study of the content of the mind. What's going on what is in there? That was the question. What's in there? And it became excluded. That version of investigation became excluded because it was recognized that it did not fit within the scientific methods. So there was a shift, because about the same time you had Skinner, who was developing behaviorist models of psychology. So you kind of had two streams growing together, right? Or two trees growing together. You had the psychoanalytic tree of Freud and Jung and Adler and all these other guys.
Yep.
And then you had B.F. Skinner, and I don't remember the other behaviorists. But behaviorism won the day because it fit better within the scheme of what can be measured, because behavior can be measured. So all scientific study that is done in the realm of psychology or therapy, in terms of what we can use, let's say, with clients when I'm operating as a professional counselor, does not concern itself anymore with the content of the mind. Rather, it concerns itself with the outcomes, the phenomena that can be observed, or behaviorism. So you have things like cognitive behavioral therapy now, dialectical behavioral therapy now. There's a shift away from talking about counseling, even mental health. If to the careful observer or the professional like myself, it's now called behavioral health. It's not called mental health anymore. It's called behavioral. And it's because the content of consciousness cannot be examined, can't fit in within that scientific category. So, for example, your dream last night was a very real phenomenon, but it depends entirely on your self-reporting. And your self-reporting is a behavioral analysis, not a consciousness analysis. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So while the effects of dreaming, meaning rapid eye movements, certain levels of brain activity, theta brainwaves, for example, can be observed. So we can observe the theta brainwave that's going on while someone's asleep and dreaming. We can observe the rapid eye movements, but we have no idea about the buildings, the trees, the characters, the story, the emotional content of what's going on in that dream, because it cannot be observed, nor can it, in most cases, be repeated. So it depends entirely on self-reporting. And then you get into, how accurately do we report something like a dream? How accurately do we remember it? People lie, not even immorally, right? Not everybody that doesn't tell the truth is doing it for nefarious reasons.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's consciousness itself provides a different category whereby we can understand dreams, we can understand human experience, the qualities of human experience, the content of the mind, if you will, the content of the emotions. But it also provides an explanation for what I would call paranormal experiences. So people having knowledge of events and things that they have no natural means. It didn't come to them through someone else reporting it to them. They didn't read about it. It came to them intuitively. Precognitions. People who have dreams about people who died, and then they find out later that, the night that they were dreaming about it, that the person was in a car accident or something and actually did pass away. So if we outframe it, is what I'm trying to say, if we outframe it beyond just scientific materialism, then we have a vast, dare I be Star Trekian, place to voyage. And this also then fits with a lot of both Western and Eastern philosophy. Like, a lot of people think that the West, because we're victims of the moment, think that the West only concerns itself with things that fit in within the scientific method. And so therefore we have to go to the East to understand consciousness. But in my personal opinion, the West has a very rich well of thought that goes back centuries on the nature of the human being from the
Mhm.
perspective of consciousness, not from the
Right.
perspective of scientific materialism.
Yeah.
So that's where I sort of landed my plane, if that makes sense, for now.
And I get it. You know, like I don't necessarily, even as an atheist, I don't think that I landed on scientific materialism. But let me just say this for the sake of being a devil's advocate here,
Sure.
is that um, I believe that behavior is a manifestation of consciousness.
Yep.
In other words, that absent consciousness, there is no behavior. In other words, like let's just say like a person that's dead, a dead body can't behave any way because it's dead, right?
Right.
The consciousness has left the building, like Elvis, right? So if there is no consciousness, then there's no behavior. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because you know I think that the only reason why we haven't been able to quantify consciousness in a scientific way is because we just haven't advanced far enough on that timeline. You know, because I believe the consciousness is energy in the same way nuclear fission or nuclear fusion is energy. That electromagnetism or any energetic force. So I think that given a sufficiently long timeline, that we'll understand this, because like what I think consciousness is information science on steroids, right? That there's reams and reams of data, petabytes um, of data that's shared between human beings. But there's also a quantum aspect to it too, because in the quantum realm, observation dictates outcome. You know, you and I can look at the same thing, but it may behave differently for you than it does for me. And that makes sense when we look at it from a behavioral level, right?
Mhm.
Because let's say your kids or my kids, that our kids are going to behave a certain way for us, but a certain way for the other of us. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That the observation, the observer influences the behavior, or they behave a different way with their friends or with their teachers or with their employers, and so on and so forth. The observation dictates outcomes. So I think that in the particular case of consciousness and some of the tangent things that go along with consciousness. So, like when we talk about paranormal activity and we talk about what we call like supernatural manifestations, I think that these are things that can be quantified. We just haven't figured out how to yet. In other words, I don't think that it's anything divine or anything that's supernatural. Because, for example, like electricity was supernatural until we understood the properties of the electron. Once we understood the properties of electron, now that cracked the code for electricity. And now electricity is not magic; it's not supernatural. It's something that we can understand and we can harness. So now, so anyway, when we talk about this in the context of atheism, you know, I don't think that every atheist is by definition a scientific humanist. I think that, and the reason why I say that is that when you get into scientific humanism or secular humanism, there are theologians that will say that that is the religion of the atheist,
Mhm.
right? And so I think that does atheism a disservice, because it puts them in a box and says, okay, this is the foundation of their beliefs. But an atheist, if you say as in not, or like the same thing in egg when you're talking about, well, when you're talking about agnostic, it's agnostic, right? So meaning anti. So an atheist is someone who is not beholden to any theological construct, right?
Mhm.
So they don't believe in anything. And I think that what happens is that theologians like to put atheists in a box because they realize they're in a box, and so they say, okay, the atheist has to be in a box like us, so that we can do an apples to apples comparison. Well, I think that it's not fair to put the atheist in the box because a true atheist is outside the box, not um, beholden to any belief system. And so that said, um, and I used to say this like when I was an atheist, they say, well, secular humanism is your religion. And I'm like, no, I don't even believe in secular humanism. I don't place any faith in that, any blind allegiance to that. And that's what faith says. Faith says I have to have some blind or inevident belief, right? In
Mhm.
other words, I don't have any concrete evidence, but something inside me, something inside me says. And the atheist doesn't have that. The atheist doesn't have something inside them that says, "Oh, no." The atheist just simply says, "Okay, what is the evidence? What
Yeah.
is the evidence?" And
Let,
so
let,
even myself as an agnostic anti-theist, I'm perfectly okay with if someone can prove to me empirically that the God of the Bible exists.
yeah,
And here's the thing. Let me say this before I kick it back to you, Aaron, is that
sure.
you and I have talked. I've had supernatural experiences.
Yeah,
I've seen people healed of cancer, seen people
right.
healed of AIDS. I've seen blind people see and deaf people hear, people that couldn't speak that they were able to make sounds. All of that. I've seen
Mhm.
all of that. Now, what is my take on that? Well, I believe that two things. Number one, that we create our reality through
Mhm.
our consciousness. That's one thing. And then also, I believe that the power of agreement is powerful.
Mhm.
That even the Bible says that if any two agree as touching a thing, that it'll happen. So it's like this is why when you get together and people say, well, we're praying, we're linking in faith, and it isn't anything that the God of the Bible is doing for you. It's like the power of your consciousness linked with the power of the consciousness of others that actually moves the tiller, right? It moves the rudder.
So I'm going to push back a little bit because
Okay.
I do think atheism exists within a box, and then maybe I'm just unable to hear. Maybe I just don't have ears to hear.
No, it's okay.
Because if someone can prove to me that the God of the Bible exists, and then we qualify it empirically, so I have to think within the only evidence that I will accept has to fit within the empirical box, which brings you back to scientific materialism. And so most arguments, every argument, to be honest, that I've heard for atheism, and not that I have an axe to grind against atheism, because I don't believe, and this is one of the things that I think is also problematic. There's so much emphasis in the Western world on faith being the thing that God's after. You're saved by faith. And then faith gets qualified, it shrinks, right? So you got to believe in God first. That's a very broad category. Then beneath that, you got to believe Jesus was God. Then you got to believe he died for your sins. And then, you know, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So we can have this natural reaction, especially from coming from Christianity, to say if someone doesn't believe in God, oh my God. Sense? Like we got to push back against that because faith in God is so central to our basic ideas and presuppositions and assumptions about deity if it exists, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that matters at all in a person's existence. I don't think that has any existential meaning. And Christianity, faith in God, has existential meaning. If you don't believe in God, you're bound to hell, or you're bound to whatever. But it
Yeah.
certainly is in heaven, right? Or
Right.
so I don't think it has an existential meaning. So I'm not just picking on atheism because, oh my God, you have to believe in God. It's just that to me, okay, so let's say this. You said given a sufficient amount of time, we'll be able to explain, paranormal experiences. I agree with that if knowledge keeps growing. If we don't take a nosedive
Right.
like we did in the Dark Ages.
If humanity doesn't destroy itself.
I,
Yeah.
I saw your post, or even, I saw your post about the Alexandrian library. Where would we be today if knowledge hadn't perished? So,
Yeah.
Let's don't assume that humanity is on a consistent upward trajectory of betterment and knowledge, because we've seen from history that that isn't the case, right? But let's just suppose, given a sufficient amount of time, yes. However, in my view, it's going to require a completely different and new paradigm.
Yeah.
That is outside of time and space. And my understanding of empirical evidence is it has to exist within time and space. And so in the same way that Newton transformed the paradigm about science, right, in his time period, Galileo, we can point to others, and then Max Planck and Niels Bohr and Albert Einstein transformed the paradigm at a quantum level. There are quantum physicists out there now saying that there is something beyond time and space. There is something outside and beyond time and space. And in order to have new advances in our understanding of the nature of reality, we're going to have to break the box of time and space thinking, which in my mind, rightly or wrongly, I may be in error here, but in my mind translates to empirical evidence. So to say agreement, so from my hearing, to say agreement is what causes miracles to happen or healings to happen, our thoughts create reality, then our thoughts are having, which I agree with you, by the way, our thoughts are affecting time-space realities outside of the normal expectation or the normal agreements of what we have or the normal behaviors of time-space reality. Therefore, in my view, it has to be coming from outside or above or something greater than time and space in order to affect that. And so therefore, I don't think, like in the same way the electron, we thought electricity was magic or whatever until we discovered the electron. But that's still fitting within that box of scientific materialism. And so what I'm saying is, I think it's going to require thinking completely outside of that box to arrive at that knowledge in the future, given a sufficient amount of time, and assuming, one, we don't destroy ourselves, or two, we don't have some kind of dip back into some kind of dark ages, which looking around on social media these days seems like a very viable possibility to me.
So
it might not be lack of information like it was with the Alexandrian library. It may be total misinformation, and the ability for people to know what's true and what's real and what's good information and what isn't, that causes a decline in human intellect. So
let me say this, right? Like quantum physics, right? Quantum physics assumes basically in order for it to work mathematically, it assumes like 11 dimensions. Right? At least 11 dimensions. We can only perceive 3. Now, we have a knowledge of the 4th, like if you say time is a dimension, but is time really a dimension, or is it just a manifestation of the 3-dimensional reality that we already understand? Is it really a 4th dimension? So again, when we say things that happen outside of what we can quantify as reality, I don't think that's anything spooky or anything that's quote unquote, the divine realm or anything like that. I just simply think that that's something we haven't discovered yet. I have this hypothesis,
Hmm.
and it's a wild hypothesis. Um, and I wish that I had really paid more attention to math in high school and in college, because maybe then I could express this. But when we do division by zero,
Hmm.
division by zero breaks every data model known to humanity. It causes computers to halt. There was this HBO series, I've been meaning to go back and watch it, but it's called Halt and Catch Fire. And basically, it was a command that would be issued to a computer that says, "Okay, stop," and just kind of self destruct, right? So when we talk about division by zero, just like the Higgs boson was
Hmm.
is called the God particle, because from the Higgs boson, any other particle can be created, right? And so for years we had no observation of the Higgs boson, but mathematically we knew it existed. We just had to, we our science, our physical ability to manifest things had to catch up with our theory. So again, when we talk about like things that happen outside of the natural realm, um, I really believe that sooner or later that there will be an explanation for it.
Hmm.
I think that there will always be something, Aaron, that we don't have an explanation for, and
Hmm.
I'm okay with that. But what I don't want to end up doing, and this is where this is the problem that I have with theology, is that we get to lazy scholarship
Sure.
and we say, okay, God did it,
Right.
and that's that. And I think that that does humanity a disservice, because ultimately, like I said, like I really believe that consciousness is a form of energy. It is a, and I won't even say that it's a wave or a particle. I believe that consciousness is an actual field in
Hmm.
which waves and particles exist,
Hmm.
right? That when we have a thought, or when we accomplish something, or when we agree on something, that is something that triggers a wave or a particle within that field, but it can't exist outside the field. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, the, see, and I get what you're saying. You're saying, okay, that there's a box scientifically, but this is the thing about the scientific box, is that someone is always trying to break the box.
I don't know about that. I
Well,
disagree.
no,
Absolutely.
no,
I totally disagree with
because again, like when we went from Newtonian physics to Einsteinian physics, right? Basically simple things, levers, gravity, uh, you know, uh, the principles of motion, and so on and so forth. So Einstein took that to a larger level. He scaled what Newton
I'm
did.
just I'm just saying that we're dealing with humans, so you can't have science. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't have science without an observer,
Right.
and that observer factor is always going to try to preserve the status quo, always, in every aspect. So, for
But
example, I'll give you a fresh example. Andrew
yeah.
Huberman did a podcast a while back talking about psychedelics.
Mhm.
And he said, that he'd been messing with psychedelics decades before, but if he would have mentioned it, he would have lost his job at Stanford.
Yeah.
So maybe eventually it comes around, but this idea, this sort of romantic idea, which is what I'm hearing, that scientists and science is just open, I don't agree with that at all. And I see that every day
No,
in
you know,
in
I agree with you. Science has its boundaries, its barriers, right? But
well, the
again, what
observer does. The people's perception. I'm not even saying science. I'm just saying that you cannot do science without human beings. And human beings like are not. They are not open to that.
let's say this, because like here's
Just
the thing,
clears it out.
science doesn't give a fuck about human beings, right?
You can't have
You
science without human beings. You cannot have an observation, something is observable, or a theory, or a hypothesis, or a test without a
yeah,
human being conducting it
yeah. I so
and
so
observing
so
interpreting data.
I agree with that, but it's like when we look at how science has progressed, again, it's like Einstein, did his theory of special relativity, and everybody was fawning over that. Niels Bohr said, hold on for a second, hang on, right? And he showed something that even Einstein was like, okay, I can't really rock with this. And then you go forward and you have you get to people like Oppenheimer and Feynman, right? And these guys have they're able to harmonize it, but then they're breaking the barriers. In other words, this is what I'm saying. And if you juxtapose science and theology, right? Theology just simply says, okay, well, God did it, and that's it. And there's nothing else. But science says, okay, what's next? Because again, we were talking about 3 dimensions. Now we're talking about 11, and now you have like the multiverse theory, which supposes that there are just as many universes as there are stars.
Right.
So again, it's like so I understand what you're saying about the observer effect. In other words, that there is no observation without an observer.
Human being effect.
But at the same time, it's the observer that the observer effect is moving the envelope, and that's the thing that I'm saying.
So let me say this. So I think even mathematically, you're dealing with something that can be quantified. So I believe that there are things in existence that cannot be quantified. That within the nature of reality, there are, and I guess it wouldn't be right to call them things then, right?
Yeah.
there is a nature to reality that cannot be quantified. I may be totally wrong. So let me give you an example practically. So if I'm talking to an atheist, like, I don't want to speak for them, but sorry guys, I think we're good enough friends. If I'm talking to Tommy or I'm talking to Jimmy or
Yeah.
I'm listening to them, or at times when we've had discussions, you cannot prove empirically that a God exists. I 110% agree with that.
Yep.
110% agree with that. My issue is that's not the only way to prove, if that's probably not even the right word, that something exists.
Okay. So
I agree.
let me ask you that.
It can't be empirically proven, but I don't limit my understanding of reality to only those things that can be empirically proven.
Well, here's the thing. If you had an experience, then
Mhm.
that means there's something that you can say, okay, I experienced this. I saw this. I know that I saw it. Whether or not it can be repeated or not, this is something, right?
Right.
And that's the point that I'm getting at, is like, when we talk about like nuclear power, like for example, nobody really I mean, we understand nuclear fusion at a very um, high level, right? But if we understood it at a low level, then we'd be able to repeat this in a safe and effective manner and have free power for the rest of humanity's existence, right? So does that mean that nuclear fusion possesses something spiritual? I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I
Is
just
anybody
think that
saying
it's
that?
something that we don't yet understand.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody's saying that though.
Well, I mean, here's and again, when we talk about like healings, we talk about remote viewing, or we talk about astral projection and things like that. I think that there is. Let me put it this way. I believe that if there were sufficient scientific study that were directed at these things, that we'd have a greater understanding of them. But here's one of the problems that science has, and this is a definite problem that science has, is that science will dismiss certain things and say, "Oh, well, that's just wives' tales, that's just foolishness," and so they dismiss something out of hand that probably merits some extra study. And again, I think that part of the problem is that because science will dismiss things that it can't immediately quantify. But I believe that consciousness is energy. And it's beyond that. Like if you go back to John Clerk Maxwell and his theory about the demon, right? That the demon would cause particles to move from one place to another, and over time, people came out and they said, "Oh, well, that was a fine theory then, but we've proven that's wrong." What if there is some force that controls the movement of energy, right? And if that's the case, then that means that's something that merits further study. It's not something that
Yeah.
can be dismissed, as well. That's just spiritual hocus pocus. And I think that's where science gets it wrong. And I think that's where atheism gets it wrong. Let's say that everything, let's say this phenomenon
Yes.
phenomena
Yes.
is worthy of study.
Yes.
It's worthy of consideration. It's worthy of a double click. It's worthy of a drill down. It's worthy, right? Now, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. If we want to understand, how is it that somebody lays hands on someone and they get healed? Now you can't just say, well, that's just non-scientific bullshit. If it happens once, it happens a couple of times. If it's not just like some isolated incident, because it does happen
Hmm.
at some interval, right? So let's figure out what causes that to happen. What is the prime mover behind that? What is the root cause behind that? And I think that's where science um, fails atheism, because science will just simply dismiss something out of hand. and
Hmm.
and and so again, this was part of my break from atheism, is that, okay, just like religion says God did it, right? And atheism will say, well, it can't happen, you know, and in either case, they're polar extremes of the same spectrum. You
Hmm.
know, if you and I'm just saying, you and let's exclude everyone else in the world just for a minute. You and I have had experiences where we've seen something that cannot be quantified by our natural senses, but we
Hmm.
know it happened.
Hmm.
We saw it happen, and we can say, "Hey, I remember this date when this happened." Okay, why did it happen? Is there some guiding hand, this divine providence that's overlooking all of this and moving pieces? Well, the problem with that is that that's not consistent, right? That's the problem with that, but it does happen, so you can't dismiss it. What I'm saying is that if we study it, and we say, okay, what were the undergirding circumstances of Aaron and Derrick's experiences? What are the common denominators? What are the common atmospheres?
Yeah.
What are the common words? What were the common thoughts? Let's look at this, and then we can say, okay, now we can get to understanding.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
that's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So examples, just real quick, and I'm going to nerd out, but and then you know, people have heard of Franz Mesmer,
Yep,
the
mesmerized.
word mesmerized.
Yep.
I've done a semi deep dive, pretty deep dive into Franz Mesmer, and it's interesting, and even Michelson-Morley experiment where they did away with the aether, where they tried to prove that there was an aether or an ether.
Mm-hmm.
Franz Mesmer did not believe for 1 second, and nor did his methods in any way, shape, or form resemble modern hypnosis. In no way, shape, or form, in my opinion. He believed that a healing happened through an energy field that he believed existed throughout all, not that different than an aether or an ether, that he called animal magnetism, that he believed came from the stars, and that his methods were balancing the animal magnetism. And if he could balance that and use animal magnetism, so in other words, channeling a healing force into the body, then that was the answer to all sickness and disease, that everyone could be healed. And he had phenomenal healings, and his healing methods sound awful damn Pentecostal. I mean, people would pass out. I mean, if you went to his clinics, you would think you were in a modern Pentecostal healing service. The academies discounted the results of his work because the theory behind his work turned out to be total bullshit. In other words, animal magnetism doesn't exist. As a result of that, he was labeled a quack, and all of his further investigation completely fell off the radar. The Michelson-Morley experiment, which again, people can Google this stuff, but they were trying to prove that there was a substance called the ether, or the fifth element of the alchemists, that it existed. And they used various different instruments to try to measure this and what have you. And their experiments were a total failure. So what they were doing was they were taking an idea of ancient philosophy that had been thought through by human beings, that was a philosophy at the time. And because of the failure of their experiment, it was deemed there's no need for any further investigation in these areas. So in other words, it's possible, in my view, that an ether does exist. We just, to your, hat tip to what you're saying, we haven't developed sophisticated enough equipment or the right categories. That's my caveat. We may not have the right categories or paradigms within which to even have the beginning of an understanding of knowledge about what Mesmer was doing, for example, or about the ether, or what some other philosophers may have considered to be true. So from my perspective, science can tell us everything we want to know about the behavior of reality, about the processes of reality, but it can tell us nothing, and I know this is a bold claim, nothing about the nature of reality.
Okay, and I, well, let me say this. I won't say that it can't tell us that. I won't say that it can't.
Yeah.
What I say that it hasn't reached the level of sophistication that it can.
Correct. And I'm saying I don't think it ever will. I guess that's where we're different. I don't think it ever will. I think it's going to require a different way of thinking about and looking at reality.
So I had this hypothesis, and I didn't finish the thought, and I realize that now. But the thought is this, right? I was talking about division by zero, and I think that when in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the answer to life, the universe, and everything was 42, right? And that is very arbitrary. Is like Douglas Adams was just kind of fucking with people, and there are people that have devoted serious thought to that answer, right? But I really believe that the key to life, the universe, and everything is the ability to divide by zero. That's my hypothesis, because it is such a firm barrier, that if it can be broken, then I think that we'll understand a lot of things that we don't understand. But that's my hypothesis. I haven't produced enough scholarly backing and haven't submitted it for peer review and all of that. But this is what I'll say is that as far as atheism is concerned, and you don't believe in anything, I'm cool with that. I'm cool. It's like if you don't believe, that is fine. But what you can't ignore is evidence, right? If you're going to be an intellectually honest atheist, then there has to be some evidence. So that being said, that whether or not there's an ether, or whether or not consciousness is some expansive field in which thoughts and beliefs, actions, that they occur, as particles and waves in that field. you know I don't know. I don't know. And this is the thing that I will say, that probably the difference between me and you
Mhm.
is this, that there are things that you believe and you're okay with not knowing.
Mhm.
For me, it's like I've learned to be at peace with not knowing, but in the meantime, I'm still swimming upstream. I'm still
Yeah.
trying to figure it out. And so I think that's the difference between the like say the atheist and the agnostic position, because I won't necessarily, you're not a theist by any stretch of the imagination, but I do, your studies and teachings on consciousness continue to expand my horizons. They make me think. And that's the other thing too, is that I think that atheism, or let's not say atheism, let's fuck atheism, but atheists need to start thinking more,
I,
and considering, okay, what are the things that are called supernatural, and why do we consider them supernatural? And if you're going, you cannot just simply dismiss these things out of hand. So that if I say that to my atheist brothers and sisters, I say, just don't dismiss anything out of hand. Um, Everything, given us a sufficiently long timeline, I think that pretty much everything will ultimately be figured out. Like you said, unless humanity destroys itself. Now, let me just say this: that the arc of human knowledge is definitely influenced and impacted negatively by religion. Their religion does come in and stymie a lot of intellectual thought. And I think that if religion is going to be intellectually honest and say that, okay, um, that we're okay with what we believe, and that we believe that our beliefs are substantive enough, then that means they should be open to any scrutiny.
mm,
It's like that's the thing, Aaron. I don't care whether it's theology or whether it's physical science. That you must be open to scrutiny, and you must be open to listening to the other side. So, to your point, when you start talking about things like, okay, I've seen something supernatural occur, where it's been a group healing, right? And you can't really explain that. Okay, we can't explain that today, but atheism has to acknowledge that there's something there.
yeah.
But religion, on the other hand, has to be open enough to say, okay, that the answer to every question is not God did it.
Mhm.
And it's like, if we're going to have a meaningful detente,
Mhm.
that a come to Jesus moment, if you will, where we
Mm.
can all just work together and work toward the betterment of humanity, then we have to um, be open to the possibility of the other one
Yeah.
knowing something that we don't.
Yeah. I keep chuckling when you're talking because I'm thinking to myself, we've been all over the map. uh, and kind of got away from, defining the categories about atheism, whatever, which we always are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I chuckle sometimes because just the way we kind of go around various different topics. And I just wonder sometimes, like, if somebody tunes into this, what they're thinking, and I'll get some funny thing in my head and I'll start chuckling about it. So I'm certainly not, and I know you know this, but for the viewers out there, I'm not chuckling at what you're saying
Oh, I
necessarily.
know.
I'm clarifying for any viewers. I'm thinking to myself different thoughts that are making me chuckle. It has nothing to do with your points. You always make really substantial points and arguments. Let me this will be kind of my first closing and trying to get back a little bit on topic. Not that we got off topic, but we got more into the science aspect of it than the actual theism or atheism of it. At least I think we did. The events that stand out to me, and that's why I said I don't know how much to share publicly. The events that stand out to me that I can think of specifically altered my life. So it's not like I was in a healing service and I saw healing and that I need an explanation for that, or I saw this miracle, or this miracle even happened to me, or I had this paranormal experience that I can't experience. I'm sorry, that I can't explain. It more altered my life in significant ways. And those things. And so here's where I think possibly atheists / scientific materialists might be missing out. I can't necessarily explain I don't have the explanation for the phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
I experienced the phenomena. I don't have the explanation for it.
Yep.
I know the categories in which most people think do not provide ample explanations for that. In the same way someone says, you can't give me an ample or a sufficient explanation for God. You can't prove it to me empirically. The events that I'm thinking about in my own mind, which are mine, the like arguments to explain those are not sufficient. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So in the same way where they're saying, well, if you're going to, and I get it, if someone's going to force on you a morality, if they're going to force on you a way of life, if they're going to force on you a lot of the toxic stuff that comes with religion, fear of death, fear of judgment, fear of the afterlife, all that stuff, then they need to be able to provide you with sufficient explanations to get you to go their direction. All I'm saying is that what has affected and impacted my life personally, there are not good explanations for that within any kind of scientific model at the moment. Now, could science explain it down the road? Sure, but it's a little bit different than, science explaining a healing. It's more like direct personal messages or guidance or messages that come from other people that have no way of knowing what I'm going through, that significantly give my life a sense of purpose and direction at key moments in my life. So that for me. Now, here's where I think and even more than ever, am valuing the unempirical ways of knowing that humanity people have had experiences with in every culture, in every time period. Mm-hmm. Intuitions, dreams, visions, things of this nature, even communication with spirits. Mm-hmm. If we make everything fit into a materialist box, this has nothing to do, again, that's why I'm chuckling, has nothing really to do with atheism or belief in God, but it's just saying if everything that I'm going to trust, if the only knowledge I'm going to trust is empirical knowledge, or the only knowledge that I'm going to trust is logic, then I am, by my own admission and proclamation, cutting myself off from other methods of knowledge that could have great significance for me in terms of the journey of my soul.
Yep.
In this life and potentially in the next life, or even from past lives, or whatever our existence was. If energy can neither be created nor destroyed, whatever form we had prior to this biological experience that we're having, whatever form we're going to take, I do believe there is a plan. I do believe there is some kind of unseen hand that is orchestrating things in our lives on a macro level. What I mean is not on the level of meticulous control, like
Right.
the God of John Calvin,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
But I do think it's not just all random happenings, and that once this body dies, that's lights out. And if that's not the case, then if we say case closed, or we're only going to receive information that comes to us this way or fits into this category, then I believe that possibly we're shutting ourselves off from a lot of things that could also bring us enrichment and growth and satisfaction, all those things.
Yeah. And I'm completely with you. Like we shouldn't dismiss the things that we don't understand. But I think that we should dedicate a certain portion of our mental faculties to understanding these things, right?
I
That we should study them. And again, I'm okay with studying, psychic phenomenon. I'm okay with studying what we call paranormal or supernatural activity. I'm okay with that. But I cannot ascribe them to any theological paradigm, and that's what I refuse to do.
Mhm.
That and again, I'm not an atheist. I not anymore. I do believe, and again, Aaron, this is something that I have to chalk up to you. And I saw my wife; she chimed in.
Mhm.
Uh, she had a lot to do with this too, and it's that that there is something spiritual, like you said, at a macro level, maybe not at the micro level, maybe not at the watchmaker, the watchmaker paradigm, but let's say someone who's making a stew.
Mhm.
you know it's like what all the macro ingredients are, but what you don't know is what the molecular interactions are that make the stew taste good,
Mhm.
right? And even the stew maker doesn't really understand that. They understand, okay, a little bit of thyme, a little bit of sage, a little bit of cayenne, and all of those are the macro ingredients, the meat, the vegetables and things like that. But what happens is that at a certain level, these ingredients all mesh together at a level that the chef doesn't see.
Mhm.
And so I'm okay with that.
Mhm.
I'm okay with that understanding. But while I'm there, I'm never going to stop searching for the answer. I'm never going to stop trying to unpack. In other words, like for me, the premise that God did it
Mhm.
is an intellectual cop out,
Mhm.
and I can't go there. I can't be there. I want to understand. Even though, man, can I share a story?
Of course.
So years ago, General Motors, through their Oldsmobile division at the time, they had built this engine called the Quad 4. And the Quad 4 was this really amazing four-cylinder engine. It was efficient, it was powerful, and it could have propelled General Motors into a whole different realm of automotive engineering excellence. And they built this car in conjunction with a guy named Dan Fueling.
Mhm.
And they built a version of this Quad 4 that set all of these speed records. They had like AJ Foyt, the noted IndyCar driver, drive this car at the Texas Motor Speedway, and they broke all kinds of speed records and all of that. And so Dan Fueling, the engineer that designed the engine, he said that he designed the intake ports to produce droplets of fuel into the combustion chamber at a very particular volume and density, right? But he said that even with all of his math, he didn't understand exactly why it did what it did, but this engine produced this crazy specific output, right?
Mm,
The thing is that what Fueling was saying is that this was essentially magic.
mm,
He was saying that he knew what it should produce by the numbers, but it consistently exceeded his expectations,
mhm,
and he didn't understand why. What I'm getting at is that there are things that happen that we don't understand, but given a certain amount of timeline, given a sufficiently long timeline, and the correct set of parameters, I really think that even if we don't understand, I think that it's something that we should investigate and try to.
sure.
That's the point that I'm getting at.
I think
I just don't want to leave it on the table as like, well, because then you get into the whole God of the gaps thing, and to me, and this is just me, to me that's lazy intellectualism.
yeah. I'll be honest with you. When I hear that, given a sufficiently long amount of time, and that's why I was really thinking that through. That sounds like the God of the Gaps, just the atheist version.
Well,
I
okay,
gotta be
but again, if we look at like internal combustion, we look at electricity, when we look at nuclear power, all of these things that at some point this all seemed like hocus pocus to us, but now we understand. And again, like we have we've gone from the periodic table to the standard model of understanding atomic particles and subatomic particles. Well, what happens when we split that further? What happens when we find out what a lepton or boson, what these things are made of? Eventually, we're going to find out, and I think that we're going to spend our lifetime trying to figure these out. And again, here's let me throw my weird hypothesis out here, is that what the reality that we exist in is somebody's lepton or boson split down to the nth degree.
so yeah. Something I've got this fly. That's another reason I'm like laughing, because this fly, and it was crawling across my camera a couple times. I don't know if you noticed, if I'm
I
just
saw
like,
it. I said,
oh
wow. I
my
said, that's
god, for the
magic.
love
It's like
of God.
you see
So again,
something, going across the lens,
the reason I'm
but
like
it's a fly.
smirking is like I'm like, I don't know, like flies are being drawn to me for whatever reason. I don't even know why we still have them. They should be dead by now in Colorado. It's been unseasonably warm. Something I got clarity on in this discussion that we have, at least for this one. Um, so growing in real time. I mean, I really got clarity. Something that I haven't seen before is that on the one hand, there is the desire to explain the nature of reality, phenomenon, life, that kind of stuff, in a very concrete sense. In other words, our shared reality, our shared world, that kind of stuff, right? So you say, you've experienced healings in meetings. I've experienced healings in meetings. So we have a shared reality that those things do occur. And then the conversation becomes, what are our theories or our hypotheses about what caused that to happen? And is that worth pursuing for future gains, right? And I think for me, it's more, it really is much more personal. The more I think about it, it's like my reasons for not deconstructing into full atheism, my reasons why I push back against scientific materialism and I talk about consciousness so much, is the personal reasons that I just mentioned, that if I had not been open to those things, I would not be the person that I am today, or I wouldn't, my life wouldn't have the same meaning and richness that it has today. And my concern then becomes not about this sort of collective explaining of our shared reality, it really boils down to, and it's, you know, why I'm a therapist, right? Why I went from preaching to crowds to meeting with individuals. It's about, my fear is if we're not open to, as I said before, non-physical reality, that we could possibly be cutting ourselves off from and missing out on things that could now enrich our lives, even if we can't explain it. So
And
given
I'm
a
okay with
sufficient
that.
amount of time to explain it may do me no good if they don't explain it for 120 years. And so if I'm waiting for the explanation before I'm open to it or even have faith in it, then it does me no good, because that sufficient length of time is
Yeah.
going to go beyond my lifetime. And so I think that's, and again, I'm just realizing this about myself as we're talking. I think that's my passion. It's like there are, I'm completely convinced, 100% convinced, non-physical aspects to the nature of reality that can benefit and enrich our lives. And if we wait for the explanation, we're going to miss it.
No, I don't think that we should wait for the explanation. I think that we should be fully participant in all aspects of it. You know, like again, for when we talk about like electricity, there were things about electricity that people didn't understand until the 1950s, right? But people had electricity in their homes. There were things that they didn't understand. You're absolutely right. There are things that we may not fully understand, but we shouldn't limit ourselves, you know, to participating in that. And so I'm okay. I'm okay with uh, participating in things like astral projection and necromancy and things like that. I don't have a problem with those things, you know. And if there is something that you can glean from that and something that gives you peace right now, I don't have a problem with that. And that so in that regard, I'm not like the average atheist, because the average atheist is just going to say, well, that's bullshit, dismiss it. And I'm not at that point anymore. I'm saying, okay, we don't understand everything. There are certain things that we can participate in that we don't understand. I mean, let me give you an example, just a real simple example. I
Mhm.
would say that 99.9% of the people that are watching this right now don't understand what the fuck happens when they turn the key in the ignition in their car.
I'm one of those.
They have no clue. But there are at least 100 processes that happen that cause that car to start up and drive, right?
Mm.
Do you need to understand all of those processes in order to participate in that? No, you don't.
Yeah, but what if you're saying, I won't believe in cars until I can understand them?
No, what well, you know what, here.
I won't get in a car. I don't believe that cars exist.
Well, let me say this: like, there are certain people that don't get on airplanes for that
Yeah,
reason.
you're right.
I don't trust them. I don't understand them, and that is a real phenomenon. But by depriving yourself of air travel, you're depriving yourself out of the possibility of seeing a lot of the world. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm okay with things that I don't understand, but what I will not do is just simply leave them be and say, okay, well, that's it.
Or yeah, or use it as a justification. So, you know, we did definitely do this. I don't know if you did. I'm sure you probably did. But in the charismatic movement, we definitely said, you know, God's confirming his word with signs following. So therefore,
Yep,
if we have supernatural signs, it validates our message and our authority.
yep.
And I would say now those things happen in spite of what we believed and preached, not because we believed and preached. But hey, I think I'm looking at the comments here. I think maybe Blessed Be He is trying to reinvent themselves as whole truth.
You know what? We talk about growing in real time, and maybe blessed be He is growing in real time, and I'm okay with that. Listen,
Yeah.
here's the thing. You know, like and
It's
again,
so
my wife
cool.
Maya, she had chimed in, and 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 Maya has said some things to me that caused me to rethink,
Sure.
my spiritual position. You have said things that have caused me to rethink my spiritual position, and so as a result, I've pretty much renounced atheism as the, you know, the overarching construct for what I have confidence in. I think that there is something bigger, but is it the God of the Bible? No, I can say with almost absolute certainty that it's not that. You
Mhm.
know, that there's that fly again.
Yeah, I know. They're driving me nuts. I got 3 of them. It's
Uh,
crazy.
and so maybe the fly is trying to tell us something, Aaron.
I know, right?
There's a hidden meaning in that fly.
They're in
In
your
that,
bullshit, you
um,
know?
but anyway, the moral of the story is that I'm okay with the things that I don't know now,
Right,
but that doesn't impede my desire to learn more.
right,
That's
right.
all. And I think that if we're going to be intellectually honest, that if we're going to take a posture of growth, then we have to say, okay, you know, yeah, these are some things that I don't understand. These are some things that have happened that I can't place a quantitative value on, but I'm okay with receiving the benefit of it now, but I want to understand. And that's the whole thing that I'm saying is that
Yeah,
whether you're atheist, whether you're agnostic, whether you're you know, spiritual, don't stop learning. Don't stop trying to understand. I mean, it's like don't get into the lazy scholarship where you're just saying, okay, well, you know, that's, you know, no, constantly dedicate yourself to understanding something that you didn't understand yesterday. That's all.
yeah,
That's all.
great place to put a cap on it. I
Yep.
would say to our atheist friends, people have are very complex. As human beings, we're just complex. We
Yeah.
just are. And I get the pushback when people are trying to push, especially in the climate that we're in right now in our country, when people are trying to make decisions that can have very real consequences to people in their lives based solely upon their religious convictions. I am 100% with you in your pushback on that. 100%. But people have a myriad of reasons for believing in the things that they do, and they don't all involve science or logic.
No.
So when atheists, and I'm speaking to, you know, just people out there, like, don't dismiss people as idiots because you think that they can't explain something to you empirically. Most people don't believe or don't follow Jesus or God or any religious system because of empirical evidence. It's not like somebody sat down with them and empirically explained
Yeah.
reality to them. Oh my gosh, yes, I believe this is real. Oh, you historically proved to me that Jesus, you know, died and raised again. So I believe in this. You know, a lot there's so many different reasons that can be just as valid or even more valid or more powerful for those individuals. And to completely discount those reasons as though the only valid means of understanding reality is and I'm not saying you, Derrick, but I'm just speaking generally,
Yep.
a person's empirical box um, discounts, it's dehumanizing in my view. There is a lot more that makes us human than just our understanding of the physical sciences. So
And
that's my final word.
I'm a-okay with that, Aaron. I'm a-okay with that. You know, there is a spiritual component to things, but I also believe that sooner or later, and I think that sooner than later, I think we're understanding it. I think, you know, we're seeing some breakthroughs in the study of consciousness.
Yeah, we
And and I think that sooner or later we're going to see some things that we can actually quantify. And I'm excited about that, you know, and what is that going to do? That's going to push the envelope. And what that means is that there's going to be something else on the bleeding edge that we don't understand.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly true. Well, thanks for having this conversation, Derrick. Was my idea tonight, and kind of a follow up for me from my Sunday morning live. So thank you
Yeah.
for
Well, I
Another
hope that
great,
I gave some good color to it
dude.
because
I'm telling you, I personally grew through this conversation for sure.
oh man,
Absolutely, 100%.
I always grow whenever we talk, so it's awesome,
Yeah.
awesome.
All right, everybody. You want to take us out since I brought us in? You want to take us out, Derrick?
I absolutely will. Thank you for attending our TED Talk tonight. Thank you for growing in real time with us. I hope that there was something said that will cause you to think, not necessarily think like us,
Yep.
either of us.
Yes.
So that being said, I hope that you all have a wonderful weekend. Make sure you tune in to Aaron on Sunday. Sooner or later, I'm going to get back to doing Sunday.
Hey, but
Sunday.
plug your book again, because part of what we wanted to do here was you got some
Yeah.
books coming out. So just close
So,
out
so
that.
again, Deconstructing Religion 2, Meta Speech, and The Martial Leader are all available for pre-order on Amazon. You can go out and you can order them now, and when they drop, they will show up in your Kindle, or the paperbacks you can't really pre-order, but once they drop, you can go out there and you can get them, and I promise you, Deconstructing Religion 2 will be the last deconstruction book that anybody who's deconstructing will need. I promise you that. Meta speech, if you want to learn how to present to an audience and understand the DNA of your own aspect toward public speaking, that meta speech is going to help you. And finally, if you are a leader, if you're in business, if you own your own business, or if you're a leader in corporate America, that the martial leader will help you understand the principles of martial arts as they apply to leadership, and it will absolutely bless you. Yes, I said bless.
Great. It's great. All right, everybody. Love you guys. Thanks for watching, commenting, participating, and we'll be back with you next week.
All right. Thanks, Aaron. Love you, man.
Love you too, man.